issue. So, Jess, thank you very much for joining us. I thought for a while I wasn't getting in touch with Jess because all my emails were going into her spam box, but we did manage to make contact, which is great. Anyhow, Jess, tell us a bit about yourself briefly and your background.
Absolutely. Thank you all for inviting me and having me here today. So I'm an academic. I'm a hydrologist at the University of Reading, not Birmingham, but that's all good. Um, and I'm interested in water, essentially, and that can be largely flooding focused. We've got a very big floods department at Reading, but also extreme weather, heat waves, droughts, and water pollution, and all that's kind of tied up in this water crisis. So I've ended up doing much more research with local communities like yourselves, so people who have an interest or want to know more and want to know how to prepare for a future that, as Francis was just saying there, we've lived in a country that for many years has sort of given this idea that we have abundant and plentiful water and it's always raining in London. And we're now seeing that that's definitely not the case. It's either seems to be rather dry and hot or flooding. And that's sort of the difficulty that we're facing. So yes, I'm based at Reading. I do a bit of lecturing and I also do some research in that area.
I mean, you talk about the water crisis and that we're going to face it in the future. But how serious is it? Because, I gather that 14, only something like I saw the figure, only 14% of households are aware of a problem or doing anything about it. So can you sort of, tell us how serious you think the problem is?
I think it is completely serious because only this morning I was asked to come and speak to the BBC about the potential for drought this summer. And when we think back only a few months ago, we were talking about one of the wettest winters on record. So I jokingly said back in January, oh, I'll be on in 4 or 5 months talking about drought. I said that quite tongue in cheek, and it's slightly shocking that I have actually had to come on and talk about the potential for drought. This is very much hitting our everyday lives now. So floods on one side, water stress, water scarcity, being told perhaps that we've had all this wet weather, but now you're basically saying we might have to have potentially use restrictions or hosepipe bans in the coming months. How is that happening? And amongst other things, at the centre of it is this idea of climate change and that the UK's rainfall is becoming just so much more variable. It's big deluges that our system just doesn't capture particularly well. It runs straight off, floods our rivers, floods our houses, and off it goes, or there is no rain. And then we're still using it, we're still demanding it. We've got many, many pressures from fast fashion and, a pair of jeans that takes, hundreds of liters of water to make, to just having that we could just turn our tap on. We're really fortunate that we live in a country where we have clean water that just comes out of the tap. And when we look at countries such as in the Mediterranean, where many of those countries, like Crete, for example, they have more rainfall than we have, even though they're much more arid. They have a lower population, but they also have a different mindset in how they're engaging with that water. They're not wasting it. And I think a lot of the time, we don't mean to waste it. It's just the way we've been set up over time that we have an abundant amount of water. And that's not the case. And we're seeing it with droughts, hosepipe bans, crop failures, rising food markets, rising costs, wildlife problems, pollution in rivers. I work for a charity where we're seeing, particularly in the summer months, huge levels of pollution in rivers having a knock-on impact. And all of this is centered around water and climate change.
When we talk about climate change, people sometimes still, some people dismiss it and saying it's a bit in the future. And I mentioned about the middle of the century having 5 billion litres of water shortage a day. But it's not a future problem, is it? It's a problem now. I gather 12 million households in the UK suffer from water stress already.
Yes, and we've been very good and I say we as in the collective country, at sort of partitioning that a little bit. And a lot of that is driven through the way in which our water has been managed over the past decades. And I could spend a long time talking about mismanagement of water resources by water companies, but I won't bore you all with that. But also as I said, the message that's been given out, the media approach to a lot of this, flooding, very serious, very hard hitting, very destructive. When we have hot, dry weather, it's painted for us as sunshine and beach days and ice creams. And we don't talk about the water side of it. The fact that if we don't have enough water, this is hugely, hugely concerning. We think about a growing population. How are we going to have enough water for all the people who need it in the next 10, 20, 30 years? At the moment, we're not going to. And it's not just water companies' problem to fix. It's not just our problem to fix. It's everybody has a responsibility to take action and be aware and think about how they can do quite small things, but hopefully will improve the situation long term.
People say though, we're the United Kingdom. We have a lot of rain. We have floods. And now you're talking about water shortages. There's a paradox here. Why do we have both water shortages and flooding?
Well, it comes back to this idea of very much climate variability. I like to think of the weather as becoming more chaotic. I mean, we still have broadly our four seasons, but we seem to flip sort of a whiplash effect from super wet weather to suddenly really dry weather. We had a really wet winter, and now we've had basically 6 weeks with very little to no rainfall. There's been a bit of rain the last few days, but you look into the forecast for next week, we're looking at a heat wave by definition. 29, 30 degrees for multiple days in a row. That's going to put pressure on our water resources. And for many of the people out there, the general public, it won't even be on their mind about the fact that next week and the coming weeks when it's hot and dry, that's going to be having an issue, because they'll just be thinking, oh, it's lovely, hot, sunny weather. It's coming into summer. That's what we want. We've also got to take into account that when we get these very hot, dry periods, it literally bakes our soil. I mean, a few weeks ago, I was outside thinking, I've got a beautiful plum tree that's gone and died. I've spent 5 years growing it and I forgot to water it because I just wasn't thinking, of course, in April, I need to be watering because it's April and we should be having rain and showers and we haven't had it. And when you get that very hard, dry ground, we've all seen it all cracked when it's been really warm and dry. And then you get very intense sort of thunderstorm rainfall, that intense deluge. It doesn't soak into the ground. It doesn't make its way properly into our aquifers and our reservoirs where we need it for use. It runs off the surface, floods, and again, doesn't get stored in the system in the way that we want it to. And I always feel really bad saying it, but basically what we need is more of those grey, miserable days that we're sort of traditionally known for, because that's when you get your water and you keep it and you can do stuff with it that you want to do.
Well, we have this crisis, and people will ask the question, why? Why do we have the crisis? Is it a behavioral crisis where we as consumers use water badly and waste it? Or is it an infrastructure problem that, we don't have enough reservoirs, we don't have enough piping, we just don't keep up with the demand that there is, and the way in which we collect water in this country? Why do we have the crisis?
Well, like many of these, it's sort of a wicked problem. You can't put your finger on one particular thing that's driving it. We aren't being particularly mindful generally as a population in how we are using our water. Compared to a lot of our other energy bills or service bills, water is cheap compared to sort of gas or electricity. So we do tend to just use it without thinking. And that's one of the things really we need to sort of get that awareness and education out to people, that just try and be mindful of the fact that this is not something that's necessarily always going to be there. And people think you're scaremongering, but actually, if we carry on like this, there is that potential in the future. There is clearly problems with infrastructure. In the centre of London, we have very antiquated Victorian drainage. We have a pipe system and sewage network that's set up as combined sewer overflows. So every time it rains, that runs straight in to our sewage treatment works and overwhelms them. So again, we're just not using that water in a sensible way for the population that we have today. And climate change, we've got to put into account that we have a growing population, more people needing water, a much faster way of life. If we think about AI and data technology centers and all that, they draw a huge amount of water. And that's just for running things like running these meetings or running, ChatGPT to help you write something. It's embedded so much hidden in our everyday use. So all of these things come together to sort of create this perfect, wicked problem of the future.
We have this problem of the future and the problem of now as well. So, what can we as individuals and communities do about it?
So at the very much individual level, and I found myself doing this last summer, so I'm as guilty as anybody else. When you're hearing on the news that there's really hot, dry weather and we should be looking after our water, then small things like when I was having a shower or perhaps bathing my kids or something, I would collect some of that water, keep it to water my house plants or put it out on the garden. Having a water butt, if you've got a garden, just to be able to not have to use it straight from the hose pipe, for example. If you've got it stored there, use it. When I'm uh, waiting for the hot tap to run, I don't know what your houses are like. It seems to take forever for the hot water to come out of my tap. So if I can fill two saucepans ready to cook pasta on later, that means I don't have to run those saucepans again later. That's just sensible use of water. So at a very much individual level, it's just trying to train your idea of doing things slightly differently. But I was really good at doing that last summer. And of course, then it rained all winter. And I have to admit, I forgot. I stopped doing it because it's like, oh, it's raining. So I'm as guilty of it as everybody else. I think lobbying, MPs and local councillors to take action on this, to be aware of the situation. As I said, flooding gets a lot of attention, and it is the sort of flip side of the coin to drought and water scarcity. They're not completely separate. They go hand in hand in our country. So sort of getting that political and sort of governance pressure is really key. And a lot of this sort of stuff, community-based focus, getting people together, talking about it, coming up with ideas is absolutely invaluable, and brilliant to see as well.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that. I mean, I think you've been through a lot and you've given us a lot to think about and told us about the context in which we're running this forum today.